electricity's been around a long, long time. Well, at least 100 some years with Thomas Edison. And some of this principles stay the same, but there's always advancements in the technology, how you handle that, right? And also that this stuff is interchangeable or it's commoditized, where you can. There are companies all over the world that make these kind of products, and you get lulled into the idea that one is as good as another, or there are no differences. But there really are differences between the quality of the products and the design, and also where they're sourced. Right, that's another big thing. Is
Welcome to Business Ninjas, brought to you by WriteForMe, where you'll hear from business leaders who are out there growing their business and slaying it every day. Learn from the masters. Let's get started.
Hey everybody, welcome back for another episode of Business Ninjas. I'm here today with Ted Wodoslawsky. He's the Vice President of Commercial Marketing and Customer First at C3controls. Ted, welcome to the show.
hello, thank you for having me.
Yeah, excited to have you. So Ted, why don't you start and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I've been in this industrial automation and controls business for quite some time, as you can probably tell by my somewhat gray beard. I started in this industry many years ago as an electronics technician, working for the Allen Bradley Company, which is now part of Rockwell Automation, or a brand of Rockwell Automation, as a test technician, troubleshooting circuit boards for PLCs. Electronics is great as a hobby, but doing it all day long got relatively boring very quickly. And there happened to be an opening in what was known as the order services department. And they wanted somebody to come in who could actually talk technically to customers and to distributors and to salespeople, because at the time there were 52-week lead times on the products and a lot of unhappy customers, and we had a tendency to ship everything but like one part. So they want to make sure that we shipped whole systems. So everybody told me I was nuts for taking the job because, it was going to be a lot of pressure, a lot of grief. But I figured I believe I was 22 years old at the time. I figured I couldn't make it worse. And that's how I got into customer facing activities. And after that, I spent many years at the Allen Bradley Company, which became Rockwell Automation, and up to management positions into strategic marketing. I left there to be the vice president of marketing for ABB Robotics and also the director of marketing for ABB Low Voltage Products. And then about 6 years ago, I left there and I landed at c3controls with a whole bag of secrets and techniques and experience that I brought to this organization. So that's how I got here.
It sounds like you've had an interesting journey bringing you to C3controls. So why don't you tell me a little bit more about C3controls?
Well, c3controls is a company founded in 1976, and they make electrical controls products. Now, what that is if you're ever going through a car wash and you see a box on the wall with buttons and lights, or you ever see someone that has big e-stop, those red buttons that say emergency stop, those are the products that we initially started making back in as far back as 1976, not the whole line. Different than some of the other stuff as far as high-end automation goes, but these products are used everywhere. And we are a company now that's, small to, let's say, mid-sized company, growing and competing with the people I used to work for. And basically, that's our industry. Anywhere electricity is being used, which is everywhere in industry, our products can be found, or our types of products can be found. What's interesting about it is even in industries as recent as solar and wind, electric vehicles, even cryptocurrency, our products are found helping manage electricity to control all those processes. So it's a very interesting kind of a place, and it's a great company. So.
That's really interesting. So talk to me a little bit about, like you said, it sounds like you're in the kind of the solar space now. Do you tend to see trends in any industry specifically or vertical?
Oh, sure. With the Inflation Reduction Act, which is a very interesting name, and I'm not going to make any commentary about if that worked or not. But there's a lot of money, or say money, investment, tax credits to kind of build up that industry, right? And being in these, when I say the industry, I say renewables energy industry. So there's a lot of investment in that aspect of things. And what that actually means is a shift from most everything in your house is AC, alternating current. That's why you get that hum from lights and that, to DC, because DC is what is actually coming off of a solar panel. That's direct current versus alternating current. So there's a lot of investment in that, and recently in that Inflation Reduction Act, there's specifically money for energy storage systems. One of the problems with wind power or solar power is that the sun stops shining and wind stops blowing, electricity stops flowing. So there's a lot of investment in battery energy storage systems, which is DC. And up until this point with the Inflation Reduction Act, if you had a battery installation going in, it had to be part of a solar installation, so you couldn't separate them. Now you can. So there's a lot of people taking that, going back and now investing in battery energy storage systems. So there's a lot of interest in that. We're seeing a lot of activity in that market space. And so I would say it's for me, it's a very interesting thing because I started off in more of the automation space, which is higher tech stuff. And when I first joined C3 Controls, I thought it would be boring. Probably shouldn't say that. My boss probably says, but it turned out not to be at all because of all the investment and this technology is used everywhere. It's kind of crazy. As I even mentioned in the cryptocurrency space, it's even in there. So it's just fascinating to see how the stuff is used everywhere. So
yeah, that's really fascinating. And the industrial landscape is constantly changing. So I'm curious, you've mentioned kind of the growth with the acts and the changes. So how does C3 Controls stay ahead of that curve and remain relevant in this kind of rapidly evolving industry?
I think two reasons. One, we are a smaller company. Rockwell Automation, I don't know how they're 10 billion, and I used to work at EVB and they're like 40 some billion. We're not in that range. And so consequently, you don't have the infrastructure and I'll say the bureaucracy, I dare say politics to a certain extent. And we're also privately held. I report right to the CEO, which can be a good thing. It also is kind of terrifying because if I screw up, there's nowhere to run to. There's nowhere to go, and so consequently, we can be very agile, right? We make decisions quickly. The team we have a good team of people. It's been the same team since I've joined there, which is now 6 years. And so we can pivot quickly and make decisions quickly and come up to speed. Whereas in a larger organization, I've been in those organizations, it takes sometimes a very long time to get to the point where you're making an investment or make a decision. So I think that's kind of how we do it. We're a little bit smaller, and we can make decisions quicker and try them out. And if it doesn't work, we also throw it aside and move on quickly.
Yeah, let's dive a little bit deeper into the different products that C3 Controls offers. So I know you mentioned kind of those buttons, those push buttons, the switches. Talk to me a little bit more about the different offerings.
So we have that, that's called pilot devices. And behind that stuff is what's known as contactors and motor starters, which you have to think about every time you walk to a factory, you see something moving, right? And that's an electric motor. So the things that do that are called motor starters and motor control. Those go into that, which actually start and stop those motors, right? And then behind that, of course, you have things for the safety of those products. So you have overloads to protect the motors. And just a few years ago, we came out with a line of what's known as miniature circuit breakers, which are you see them in your house. You open the little panel on the wall, there's a circuit breaker. We never had those before. We added that, and that's really kind of helped us step into some of these bigger industries. And so we have those lines, and we're also always adding kind of to that. If there's a thing called a control panel, I mentioned that you see in a car wash or in a factory, you open a panel, there's a lot of things in there. There's things like wire duct that manage the wires. There's terminal strips, terminal blocks, which wire things up. There's what's called a miniature circuit breaker, which I mentioned, which is a small circuit breaker. Then you have a line of those. And each of those things kind of leads into the next. And for example, we're coming out very shortly with a line of DC miniature circuit breakers, which is typically most circuit breakers out there are AC, as I mentioned. DC behaves a little bit differently, so you need to get a little more specific in how you handle those things. So basically anything that if someone is familiar with control panels, you open it up and look inside. We make all those things, and I believe the catalog, and because of the nature of the products, everybody's installation is a little bit different. We have a very customizable catalog. In fact, I mentioned the other thing. I also manage the order entry side of the business. I call it, as I mentioned before, I call it the alpha and the omega. I do the demand generation. I also have team people that enter the orders. We actually get an order every day for something we never made before. So you have to make it, because we're configurable, we make it that day. We create a bill of material and sends over to the factory. If we get the order by 6 o'clock, we try to ship it out that same day if we have it. So we actually are creating on a daily basis. We're adding to the catalog every day with something new. And I think someone did the math. If you actually did all the combinations, there's like 15 million possibilities that we could come up with. on a daily basis. Well, we don't ship out 50 million things every day, but you get my point. It's like kids playing Legos, right? You have a whole bunch of Legos. Nowadays, of course, you have a design about the Lego. When I was a kid, you had a Lego and you basically made a square. It's pretty much what you did, but you built it yourself and you took the different pieces. And that's kind of the way this stuff works is we design and we build stuff every day that's new, as well as have a standard catalog of products. So it's all those pieces that do the basic control in any given factory or installation where there's electricity being used. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. And I'm curious to pick your brain a little bit more, Ted, kind of talking about common misconceptions. I'm curious if, in the industry, there are points that maybe your clients think are true, or, people that you just run across in the street that think are true that, may not necessarily be accurate. Does anything stick out when I ask that?
Well, sure. And I think it was even my conception, like when I came to the company, that this stuff is simple and basic. In one hand, it's true because electricity has been around a long, long time. Well, at least 100 some years with Thomas Edison, and some of this principles stay the same, but there's always advancements in the technology, how you handle that, right? And also that that this stuff is interchangeable or it's commoditized, where you can. There are companies all over the world that make these kind of products, and you get lulled into the idea that one is as good as another, or are no differences. But there really are differences between the quality of the products and the design, and also where they're sourced. Right, that's another big thing. Is C3controls is based in Beaver, Pennsylvania. For a long time, we manufactured everything under our same roof. In Beaver, we actually had machines designing what's called a mold for an injection molding machine or a tool. We made our own molds. We molded our own parts. We did all these things until recently. That was all in Beaver, but we opened up a facility in San Salvador, El Salvador, to do manufacturing. Didn't want to go to Asia. Want to stay what's called nearshoring, I believe. And we also have manufacturing in India. So we kind of avoided the China opportunity / trap, as it turned out to be, and that allowed us to, stay current with manufacturing technologies. And also be much more resilient to supply chain impacts and that. So there's a lot to this stuff. One of the things I like to point out, there's been some books written on how large systems fail. And if you dig into what happened with any of like major disasters through time, whether it was Apollo 13 or something else, or even an airplane going down, it's usually something very simple that failed. And that can cause a disaster. So it's real important that you pay attention to these types of products and where you're getting them and the quality of them and that, because a small failure can lead to a major disaster. And that's one thing I think people don't have a good conception of.
That's really interesting. I appreciate your insight on that. So, Ted, I think this has been a terrific conversation. As we start to wrap up, is there anything that you want to leave our listeners with, whether it be advice, whether it be anything about the industry, anything like that?
Well, I'm a marketing guy, right? This is what I do. And the thing I've learned over time, if I had to give advice to anybody in a marketing role, and I think we know this is why we're doing this, right? First thing is content that's relatable, right? That don't talk down to your customers, but also don't assume they know something that they may not know. So when you educate, I think we've all been in the meeting where someone throws out an acronym and you want to go. You don't want to be the person going, "What the heck you talking?" You don't want to be that person. So oftentimes, like we write a lot of content that's designed to educate. So that's first thing is educate, right? The second thing I would say is one of the more important things I did, and I came to this discovery, is you can have all the greatest content in the world, unless you have a SEO strategy, a good search engine strategy, and a dedicated person to do it, it's all for naught. I actually have a full-time, probably two biggest things I did since I came here was getting the content right, or as right as we could, and also having somebody full-time working on that search engine and working on that website. Doing it here and there does not work. I would say things like doing podcasts, staying current with those kind of things. I guess I got to start doing reels on Instagram now for videos. I find that's got to next I got to do next. And so stay relevant and try to stay ahead of the curve as much as you can, or at least if not ahead of the curve, don't fall too behind the curve, right? Stay on the curve. That's my advice.
There you go. Well, Ted, thank you so much for taking the time to break down all of the insights, all the different offerings that C3controls has, the importance of, the work that you're doing. I think this was a terrific conversation. I really appreciate you being on Business Ninjas today.
Okay, thank you. Glad to be here.
Great to have you.